All right, we're going to get started. We have a issue related to air travel and land use. Let's hear about it. Yeah. Linda.
So this is actually a property disposition. You've received a declaration of no further need from the county executive to dispose of about 17 and a half acres of property on Hawkins Creamery Road. And it will go to the Davis Laytonsville Airport LLC. It's a fee simple transaction of $131,000. That is less than the fair market value based on the appraisal done by the executive. So he has requested that the council waive the requirement for a full market transaction. There is background information in your packet because, well, there's two pieces of background information. There's an aerial in your packet, but you also looked at this when you actually looked at a zoning text amendment related to this use. And so I included the information in your packet that sort of is like the story of Davis Airport, which has been there for about 40 years. FAA, they need to extend the runway. They need to have a safety area. The reason for being below fair market value is that they actually can't build anything on the property, so they can't have any structures in the way, and so the executive is recommending the below fair market value. I did just want to say and have the executive staff comment, one of the other reasons to support this is that the airport has a really good relationship with county. They allow the police to use the runway to calibrate patrol cars. They have fire and rescue training out there, and the memo indicated that they're also in discussions with both Montgomery County Public Schools and the University of Shady Grove about aviation. And so I would recommend approval. I would just say, because of the scheduling constraints, you're having this work session prior to the public hearing. And so when we do that, we always just like to announce that if something comes up at the public hearing, the Joint Committee can always decide to reconvene to reconsider whatever recommendation that you make today.
All right. Seems very simple and straightforward. Any comments or questions from my colleagues? If not, Executive Branch, anything you'd like to share to further help our understanding?
Good afternoon, Greg Ossett, Department of General Services, and I'll be very brief. Council staff's done a great job capturing what is about 50 years of background on this property, and you'll recall from council members who saw the ZTA just last year that essentially paved the way to make this improvement, and really this is just a technical follow-up to address the property disposition piece of having the runway on county-owned land and create a potential liability issue there. So under the advisement from our risk management folks and our county attorneys, we wanted to go through with the disposition as opposed to a long-term arrangement, a lease or a land lease. We just want to sell it to them and be done with it. The exhibit on Circle 9 outlines the county property. The county will retain some additional residential lots off of Pocahontas Drive, which are further down in the flight path, and so the county will hang on to those. So the 17 acres is what's bordered there in the white. It's a long pipe stem coming from Hawkins Creamery. Runs adjacent to the runway itself, and then a big bulb out at the end. And that's what we would propose to sell. We did have an appraisal. The appraisal came in at about $377,000. I will tell you that it was very difficult finding an appraiser to do an appraisal of land that we proposed that had deed restrictions on it in terms of what could be used for. It is an ag reserve, so it did have some value. But Mr. Harvey, who is Davis Airport LLC, provided some comparable sales information from other airport facilities in the county, and that's what his offer of $131,000 is based on. So we felt like there was some legitimacy to that, but it was under market based on the appraisal that we'd received. Other than that, Keith Miller's here from Revenue Authority in case you have any questions about the dynamic between the air park and this airport. This is a privately owned and maintained airport.
Thank you. It sort of seems like it has value only really to the airport. I mean,
yeah, as you can see from the aerial, the runway improvements are already there. It would propose to do more, and that's what it's going to be. It was a bit of a challenge having to wade through that with the appraisers, but at the end of the day, it is 17 acres and it's zoned ag reserve, so there is some inherent value based on the comparables in the sales data.
Keith, anything you'd like to add?
And no, just that I guess I would just make a small statement and say that the Revenue Authority has been involved with the state and the owners at Davis since the beginning of this. The goal here is that we hope, as far as a system of airports within the state and even more locally here in Montgomery County, is that with these improvements that are planned for Davis and with the state support, is that the runway will get up to a acceptable standard that flight training can naturally progress over there. We can't mandate that flight training happens over there, but we believe that will be a natural movement, which would be beneficial to the residents around Gaithersburg.
Okay. Great. I think committees are approved without objection. Thank you. All right. We'll move on to a bill relating to impact tax exemptions. I want to just take a moment to explain that this bill, has been an education process. We've had to field a number of inquiries about the impact of the bill, and as we've learned about the impact of the bill, I think we've sort of whittled down the likely impact of this bill to a kind of a kernel. The initial idea here was just to ensure that the county is getting the best results for its investment, that the 25% MPDU, that we waive impact taxes for buildings that do 25% MPDUs because it's a really phenomenal policy and it's working wonders. I am overjoyed by what results that I'm seeing with buildings going up in downtown Bethesda, for example, where I think these MPDUs are just really profoundly valuable. They're valuable everywhere, but unexpected to see the market responding as successfully as it has. And I think it speaks to the importance of certainty and clarity about financing. And I know one of the initiatives we'll be taking up soon and looking forward to very much with DHCA is just helping improve some of the transparency around the financing strategies. I think that kind of speaks to it. This is a very transparent, clear financing program. If you provide 25% of MPDUs in your building, you're eligible for your impact taxes to be waived. It is getting great results. So the idea for the legislation was to make sure that those projects that qualified were giving the equivalent of MPDU provisions, that we were getting housing that was just as valuable. I think we've basically learned that we were, that to the extent that entities were qualifying based on other programs, they were qualifying on programs that were also just as good as MPDU programs. And in other words, I think that this is there isn't a whole lot to see here as far as the additional, in my opinion anyway, as the sponsor of the bill, the additional value of the legislation, but it is addressing a kind of a bookkeeping issue fundamentally. I just want to preface the comments with that. I think it's possible we can make improvements to the 25% impact tax waiver program, and I think that there's a lot that we ought to dive into at the appropriate time. But this bill was envisioned as a kind of a housekeeping provision, and I think that's where it started, and that's basically where it's going to end up. But with that in mind, let me turn it to Linda and Bob and ask them to walk through the packet. And we have joining us a number of different officials from planning and from DHCA, and we'll introduce them when we turn to dialogue. So, Bob.
Okay, good afternoon. As you said, this bill is actually, the bill itself is pretty straightforward. It did bring up at public hearings some interesting questions that the bill doesn't really reach. It does one simple thing. The current law is that if you have an affordable unit, if you have 25% MPDUs or another type of affordable unit, which generally called tax credit units, which have similar income requirements, we waive the market rate unit impact tax. And what this bill would do was restrict that 25%. You need to have 25% MPDUs. With regard to the tax credit units, already, if you come in with tax credit units to make up your 25%, you can continue to use tax credit units. You would just simply have to agree to convert them to MPDUs when the time for the tax credit units expires. Right now, I think it's in the packet, it's 15 years with a potential additional 25 years. For the tax credit units, the MPDUs need to be restricted for 99 years.
Okay, but I want to pause you there because I understand it a little bit differently than what you just said. You may have an agreement with DHCA, is my understanding, as a building owner. You can enter into an MOU with DHCA where your units can be essentially qualified as providing the benefit of the MPDU program. You do not necessarily have to lose control of them or essentially give them to DHCA to run through their MPDU program. There's a lot more nuance here than that. And I think one of the concerns that we heard was that, for example, a building wants to do a special program for people with disabilities. Are they going to have to lose their units and give them into the MPDU program? And the answer that I've heard is that they would not. So it's a just very subtle distinction here about operational implications of, your units have to become MPDUs. That does not mean that you would lose them. It just means that DHCA will designate them as MPDUs because they're providing the same benefits that MPDUs provide.
The only development that this would impact negatively, of which we haven't had any of late, but we have them in the county. If you had a developer who was going to use tax credits and have affordability for that period, which is a period that the county doesn't control. So right now it's 15 years plus a 25-year extension, which is what the state mandates, but that's not in our control. In the past, sometimes they'd only been 15 years. So if you were a developer and you were going to go in with a tax credit, and then your intent was when the tax credit period was going to expire, you would move those into market rate units. That would be the only kind of theoretical scenario, and now they would have to have those units have affordability for the full 99 years.
But what we've also learned is that if that was your plan, you were never going to get those tax credits. The state wasn't going to give them to you because it was going to be clear in your bid that what you were going to do.
They could get tax credits, and if they committed to 40 years, and then right now you would be giving the benefit of the impact tax waiver to a development that after currently 40 years would not have to keep that affordability. And so the goal here is, because I would like to say when I listened to the council, we kind of use MPDUs like Kleenex, right? We just, we say MPDUs, but when the council discussed this, I think everybody's understanding was we were going to have long-term affordability as the MPDU program does, because it's a very good benefit. It's a very good economic benefit, right? So the only thing that this does is to ensure that the length of affordability for the 25% will be for the 99 years or in the future, whatever MPDU program requires.
And I think that is worthy. And I think the likelihood of a project being flipped to for-profit is something that I thought, oh, that's a concern. I've learned that it is a very unlikely scenario, but it is one that can't hurt to legislate on. But that there's such a scarcity of these tax credits that they go to projects that typically have, they might have HOC involved, and HOC ends up as the owner of the building, not a private developer, and so on and so forth. But so it's worth I think it is worth stipulating for the future, just in case. But again, what I've sort of learned is, as a practical matter, this is an issue where the system is taking care of itself a little bit. But please, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there. Or, thank you. Keep going. Well, I did mean to interrupt you, actually.
Yeah, you did. I think.
Oh, we've got a light. I've got several lights. Okay. Do my colleagues want to talk now, or do you want to complete the review of the legislation? Okay. So, Bob, please continue.
All right. So the bill itself, we've already explained what this bill would do. It modifies the current 25% waiver rule. There was some testimony at the public hearing from DHCA, then Acting Director Mr. Getzinger, about questioning the general waiver policy, the 25% waiver rule. That's not in this bill. It doesn't change that. That's something that I believe Chair Anderson's testimony said that the Planning Board would be happy to look at as part of the SSP, do some analysis as part of the SSP review, which will be next year.
They could do it, or the council could do it.
Or
I'm
council could do
considering
it,
whether we
but
just do it ourselves.
This is a pretty limited bill, and if you open up the whole idea of the waiver, it's going to take more than one work session, and it's a different bill, really.
Right.
So we don't recommend you do that here. You may want to look at that policy, though, in the future. I think that's probably a good idea to look at it and see what the effect is. Then the only other issue, really, is a transition clause, which, in looking at the way the bill was originally drafted, it simply says that the new rules, let's just call them the new rules, would apply to any development impact tax that would be due or is paid after the act takes effect. Impact taxes are paid, you can pay them when you get your building permit, but you don't have to pay them until either 6 months or 12 months after, I believe it is, depending on what type of project you have. So that would affect a lot of current projects that way. That a more reasonable transition clause, we believe, is to limit it to anybody who hasn't received a site plan approval from the planning board. We've got, there's a chart in the packet from the planning board staff, and Lisa Gavoni is here. She prepared it. Jason is here as well from the board. And it kind of shows that if you use the planning board approval of the site plan, there's currently no projects that have already filed that are currently using tax credit units for affordable house for the 25% waiver that don't already have planning board approval. So this would truly be just prospective only for projects that haven't actually reached the planning board stage, haven't actually filed for review by the planning board.
Okay, but I just want to reiterate again, we are not saying that those projects wouldn't also qualify. They might. They probably would. In fact, I think in our review, we thought they all would. It's just that they would qualify when they have reached an agreement with DHCA to kind of validate that. So it's not that these projects that we are, like the grandfather issue does not mean that we're admitting or stating that those projects that are in the pipeline wouldn't also have qualified.
They would simply have to, well, if they were planning to use tax credit units to meet the 25%, they'd have to agree to convert them to 99 years of control.
To whatever it is that DHCA, I guess maybe it is 99 years, has to be in the
99
memo,
years
but-
of control under the MPDU program. So, while, as we talked about, not a major change and something that a project could do, if we change it to site plan approval by the planning board, it would allow everything to go through that's already in the process, the way, under the current rules, and would make it pretty much prospective. That's an issue for the committee. You could leave it at the current. One other,
Okay, wait, so you've recommended a transition?
I'm recommending a transition, well, there is a provision, some sort of transition clause that would allow existing projects that already have site plan approval.
I would just recommend something less, I would say sketch plan. What's the very first thing that a project might have done? Sketch plan, right, Lisa? Jason? Sketch plan. Yeah, I would, because I don't think this is actually changing anything.
Lisa Gavoni for the record. Concept plan is the first iteration, then it goes to sketch, so either one of those is pretty early in the application process.
Yeah. I would prefer.
Well, I'm just, if you look at the list on circle whatever, 36 of current projects that are in the pipeline, it's in the back, the last page of the packet. They're broken down by, these are the projects that are planning to use the 25% waiver provision.
Okay.
Almost all of them are actually using MPDUs. They're not using tax credit. But you can see the last grouping there are currently under review projects, and none of them are using, I don't believe any of them are using tax credit. You know, if you look at the column for other affordable units, they're all zeroed out. All those projects are zeroed out for other affordable units. So
You have, it says concept plan there. So in the, under review, they say concept plan, sketch plan, preliminary sketch plan.
right. So I mean,
But if you said site plan approved, then that would not include those.
Yeah, it wouldn't, but there are none existing that are actually going to be affected.
But they don't affect, because they're not planning to use tax credit against anyway.
Right. So.
It's a microcosm of this bill, I think,
You
in the
could
end.
use sketch plan, you can use concept plan, or you can use planning board site approval. It probably isn't going to make a difference.
So it doesn't matter either way.
I mean, there may be people that, as far as we know, it's not going to make a difference.
Can I, all right, I'm going to go to my colleagues just in a moment, but I'd like to go to DHCA. Can you again shed some light here, Stephanie? Thank you. On this, not on the immediate question of the transition plan.
Stephanie Killian, Chief of the Division of Housing with the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. I did want to point out there are a couple of tax credit projects on here. Most of the ones that have zero are ones that are have HOC controls. So the Willow Manor, Fairlandale, in the top part of the chart, Willow Manor, Fairland, Victory Haven, and Sligo Art Space are all projects that have low-income housing tax credits in them. And are they 100%? No, one of them. So Art Space is 100%. Is Victory, and I think maybe Victory Haven. On the second grouping, Hillendale Gateway is an HOC project, and Elizabeth Square is an HOC project, both of which have all these have 4% tax credits, I believe. And Kensington Knowles Manor also has tax credits.
So these are examples of projects where the building owner comes to you and says, I want to qualify, and you review their terms, and you, I guess, what have you said to these projects if they want to qualify? They need to.
So with a tax credit project under our current policy, we would say, and they're claiming the tax credit units as meeting their MPDU requirements. We set agreement with them that says for the term of the tax credits, they act like they are tax credits. They are administered under the tax credit program. They do not have to follow the MPDU rules, like come to us for example, the income requirements of the tax credit program would apply. At the end of the tax credit compliance period, then the MPDU controls kick in for the remainder of the 99-year term. So we allow the tax credit program to operate on its own and then the MPDU program would follow behind it, ensuring compliance for full affordability for 99 years.
Asim Nigam, Director, DCA. Now, that being said, the developer will have to commit certain number of MPDUs upfront for 99 years. So it's not that they just, they can do overlap between tax credits and MPDU.
Overlap.
Yes, they could do overlap. Now, this is not to say that a developer can say, well, if the project gets foreclosed upon, there goes your MPDU requirement. We have an agreement up front that those MPDUs will remain affordable for a period of 99 years. If it's a tax credit property, they can do overlap of tax credit units with MPDU.
So their tax credit units count as the first share.
Correct.
And they have to go to the additional to get the 25%.
Correct. Because if it's a 4% transaction, the affordability requirement under the federal law is 30 years. On 9%, maybe 40 years if that's what the state is requiring. But under the federal law is 30 years, whether you have 9% or 4% tax rate units. Now, more often than not, for 9% credits, in order to be competitive, a developer will commit to 40 years of affordability.
Right.
So that they are competitive. But that's not the case for 4%. So from our point of view, a developer will have to commit upfront, these are the MPDUs, and the affordability shall remain for a period of 99 years.
Okay, are you worried at all that if we change the language, that tax credit buildings will feel that they aren't going to qualify and they won't come in? No.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we're giving the flexibility to the developer to count those tax credit units as MPDUs.
Yeah.
However, upfront we'll have an agreement with the developer, look, this is your obligation under the MPDU program for a period of 99 years. However, if you have tax credit units, you can count those towards the MPDU program.
Exactly. All right. Why don't I go to Councilmember Juando? Did you have your light on? I do. All right. Committee Chair, did you want to speak before? Okay. So then Juando and then Friedson.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. So this is probably primarily for planning. Just, this has been mentioned. While this bill in and of itself doesn't address the larger policy issue of the 25%, you all did mention in your comments, as did DHCA, that we recommend doing a review of the entire program to see what the bang for the buck is. What are these costs per unit? What are we getting? And is it a fair trade-off? Obviously realizing this is my first opportunity to address this issue in any part since joining the council. And I just wanted to know, you mentioned waiting to SSP in summer 2020. I think that's a little long to wait. When you wrote this memo, I think there were 5 projects that had gone through. Now we're, if I did my math right, which is always dangerous and on dais math, that there are up to 17 either in various stages of the process. So can you speak to, have you started that analysis of seeing where it goes? And I'm looking at Lisa, but whoever, and if not, can we get some preliminary information just on this so that we can start considering it even before the SSP if we want to?
Sure. Jason Sartori, Chief of Functional Planning at the Planning Department. I would say, well, first of all, in terms of the update to the subdivision staging policy, we are in that now. We are doing it. It won't come before you until next summer, but we are starting that process now. And actually what you see here in that chart on Circle 36, this is kind of the beginning stages of that type of analysis. If you look all the way down at the last column there, it'll show you what the cost, quote unquote, cost per extra MPDU is. So for each additional unit that's placed in the MPDU program, how much in lost impact tax revenue, both in transportation, and that's what that column is. And so that is starting to give you a sense of that type of analysis. And what you'll see is that value there changes and varies depending on how much they were required to do as a base. where in the county it is, because we have different impact taxes by different policy areas, and the type of units that they are creating.
So, thank you, that's helpful. So for example, the Egan property, which is in concept plan at 330,276, is that in that last bucket? That's per unit amount of impact tax that is being foregone based on they have a 357 units. I just want to make sure I'm explaining and understanding it right.
Per additional NPDU. So you can see there, based on getting up
45.
25%, they're building an additional 45. They would build an additional 45 NPDUs, and that's the amount per NPDU.
So to get the total number, 330,276 times 45.
Right, and that's actually in the column about midway through where it says total. So you could see that's about 14.8 million in impact taxes. That's an estimate of,
That will not be paid under the program for the 45 MPDUs.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that, go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah.
One other thing is, you mentioned our memo. The memo referred to the 5 projects as ones that had gone to building permit. If you look at the first bucket, I double-checked right before we went in, and that's only 6 projects that have gone to building permit that have actually foregone their impact taxes, but there are still these projects in various forms of the application process. So we've only had like 1 extra project since the.
But if we were to make a change or wanted to make a change, it would be pretty, we would not do it to anyone who's currently in the process.
Right.
So, people could continue to apply theoretically up until that point.
Well, right, and that would really depend on the language in that grandfathering clause there. What
So
stage?
that's why that is
That's
important.
where it does, yes.
Yeah.
Although to staff's point that, in that last group there, those particular projects which have not yet received their site plan approval, none of them appear to be at this point pursuing any other affordable units outside of the MPDU program anyway. So.
All right. Thank you.
The transition clause would be very important if you're going to change the 25% waiver rule completely, but
Well, that was my point.
not so much here.
I think you'd like to have some flexibility there, but, if that decision would be made down the line, so. Well, I was saying that, to Bob's point, the transition clause would be important if we were to at some point take up revisiting the 25%. And so that's why I think to allow that flexibility, I certainly am interested in looking at it again, but I don't, I'm one council member, but I just think it might be prudent to include it for that reason.
Well, I think we're in agreement about including a transition clause, and Bob has recommended site plan approval. And based on the pipeline of projects, whether we choose approval or sketch plan submission, it doesn't seem like it would matter. So since Bob, would you agree it doesn't matter, Jason? Is that?
Well, I would say that not every project does a sketch plan. So what we did for the MPDU bill is we said any application that is received as complete by X date, which would just make sure that if they did concept or sketch or some collaboration, that we'd pull them all in with the earliest form of application.
Let's do that.
Yep.
I'm hearing agreement about that.
Okay, so you want to change the transition clause to,
Lisa?
Any application.
What Lisa said.
What Lisa said.
we could just put that in the bill.
Yeah. It's fine. My phone's never going to stop ringing. It's fine. Any application received as complete. And our intake staff will know that that's when we receive the application.
As complete. And that's the language, the transition clause we used in the bill to
Yes.
change the MPDU program?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Thank you, Bob.
And is that 5-0 to do
I'm
that?
hearing without objection on the transition clause. Councilmember Freeds.
Thank you for that. Appreciate the comments that have been made. I think I appreciate the Chair Reamer's intention here. I am concerned, though, that this is, as we've heard, a solution in search of a problem. I don't think there's really a problem here that exists. At least there's nothing that I have heard that is a significant issue. And I agree with the idea of having a comprehensive look at the impact tax waiver and what the value is that we're actually getting and what the costs would be. I think my sense of that is what we saw from reports that we've seen, including some of the summer fellows who did reports, where they do vary based on the location that they are for obvious reasons. The more valuable the land, the more desirable the area to the private market, the more valuable the MPDU bill is. We don't change the MPDU program based off of that, but the practical reality of the MPDU program in the marketplace functions that way. And I'd be interested to see what it looks like, but I think that the premise is good. It is encouraging, as Chair Reamer said, that we've had interest in affordable housing in places like Bethesda with significant amounts of affordable housing. And I get concerned when we, while I appreciate and understand the idea of the 99-year commitment, and I think that's important, I think the practical reality is most buildings don't last 99 years, and if they do, affordability isn't the challenge, because those tend to be the market rate affordable in year 40 through 99. That tends to be the market rate affordable housing in desirable areas. A luxury product from today is the market rate affordable of tomorrow. And so that's, to me, less of the challenge. The bigger challenge here is we don't have enough new housing, and not enough new housing is affordable to enough people. And anything that we're doing to send a message that we don't want more housing, or any incentives that we are trying to use in order to encourage affordable housing, to me is a difficult way to approach a vexing issue. So I'm in a little bit of a tough spot here personally, because I don't really see the practical need for that. I mean, from a practical standpoint, even though an MPDU is 99 years, and that's laudable in making a statement that we were going to have a 99-year affordability, there's a good chance that the building is going to get redeveloped inside of 99 years. It's not a land lease. So it's really the life of the property, which is great. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's 99 years, and the new building is going to have new MPDU and affordability requirements. And so I'm not personally convinced that we're really solving a problem that exists here. And as evidenced by the chart that was provided, and by the comments even that Chair Reamer mentioned, I have yet to hear an instance that this would be really solving, besides the hypothetical idea that we're not sure if there would be affordability for long enough in a building that nobody can point to a specific answer. So if all the folks who have raised concerns about whether or not this would send a chill to those who are interested in tax credit deals and others, and the response to that is, don't worry, none of them are included, and none of them are an issue, I just personally question the problem that we're solving. While I appreciate the intention and the goal, I'm just a little bit concerned about passing legislation that doesn't necessarily solve a problem.
I think you make good points. I mean, if this had the effect of sending a chill to tax credit deals, I would be very concerned about that. So, I think that's why I asked. Do you think that if we make this change and the code reads MPDU rather than affordable, that'll be interpreted differently? And you won't get buildings that are coming in,
Well, as long as we're allowing the overlap of tax credit unit.
It's the same, it's like a small, it's again, the people that do tax credit buildings are part of the affordable housing development community, and they're like at the table with you. Everybody else is doing MPDU buildings. They're not affordable housing developers with tax credits. They're just doing straight developments, taking advantage of the MPDU provision. And now they're affordable housing developers, but they may not be. All right, I heard your point, though. I think you make a good point.
And this is not.
Linda, yeah.
I just want to be.
Help us through the thicket.
Well,
here.
I just want to be clear, however you decide policy-wise on this, but just understand that currently this kind of thing happens because every building has to identify the amount of MPDs that are required by zoning. So when a building comes in and it's, 80, 100% tax credit units, they still have to identify like 15% of the units to be MPDUs
Right.
when those conditions expire, because they have to provide whatever's required by zoning. So if 15% is required by the zoning and density that they got, they would have to do that. So this process of converting, like identifying up front, allowing things to play out during whatever tax credit or other affordable program they have, and then making sure you have the required amount of MPDs already occurs all the time. So I just don't want anybody to think that that process is new. In this case, it would require that not only do you identify the number of units you need for zoning purposes, but you would have to require the number of units that you need for the tax credit purposes, that's all. But the process is long-standing of having to identify MPDUs. That's all. I just wanted to be sure nobody thought it was a new process.
Okay.
And the change, as I think we said earlier, is that we have no control over the number of years the tax credit unit program is. I mean, right now it's 40. Sometimes next year it could be 15. So this gives us more control over how long the affordability exists in these units. If we're giving them the tax credit, it's a pretty hefty tax credit. We're taking all the market unit, the market rate units and saying you don't have to pay impact tax. So they are getting something for that.
Go ahead.
I mean, I guess my question, to Councilmember Joanna's point, I think we might come at this issue from a different perspective slightly, but the same idea is we aren't talking about what the deal is that we're getting. I think we ought to, my view is we ought to hold off on the bill, not vote on it, actually study what the deal is that we're getting. And I'm happy to change the requirements to update that. I happen to think that anything that we're doing that is getting upwards of 25% and more in high demand areas of the county is a win. In urban areas and transit oriented areas, is likely a win. If there are more creative approaches to do it, great. We always need to be careful stewards of taxpayer dollars, but our problem in affordable housing isn't years 41 through 99. It's just not. That's the least of our concerns. I'm not saying it's not something that we ought to think about, but we need to be thinking about today and the fact that we don't have enough housing, we don't have enough affordable housing in the county. And to me, that's the crisis that we're in. And the council president has been a leader at COG dealing with these issues, not just in the county, but regionally. The numbers tell the story on that. And so, that would be my view. I think the default should be, if we're solving a problem, let's pass a bill. If we're not solving a problem, I'm not sure we need the bill, but I will yield on that.
Thank you. Good comments. This doesn't do anything negative to the housing market today, I think, just to be clear about that. To the point of what happens after year 40. Let's say a building has gone up with 25% affordable MPDUs. The building owner wants to completely renovate the building. They have to retain MPDUs. What's the distinction between a complete renovation and tearing it down, building something just like it without the MPDU requirement?
The MPD requirement applies to new construction. So if you have an existing building and you renovate it, you do not have a new MPD requirement. You're just renovating an existing building. If you demolish a building and replace it completely, the new construction on the site would have an MPD requirement. If you have an existing subdivision that has several buildings in it and you add a new building separately, that new building only would have a new MPD requirement.
So if you have a building with 25% MPDUs, 50 years from now, it's time for a major update. You could tear the building down and build a new building without 25% MPD requirement, or you could renovate the building.
You'd have whatever the base requirement would be for the new construction
and you would have whatever the new construction requirements, or you could renovate the building, presumably at a lower cost, but you would retain the 25% PDU building requirement. Okay. Not sure how, frankly, I'm not sure how that plays out, you know, that's hard to imagine exactly, but.
Just a couple of comments as Stan corrected, and my colleague corrected me. In the state of Maryland, even for 4% transactions, 40 years. Now, to Council Member Fitzon's point, you know, more than likely, even if I'm doing a transaction under ground lease, which is for 99 years, more than likely after 40 or 50 years, it will need major renovation, or it could be just redeveloped. So, and that's where we are saying that if it's a new construction, then whatever the MPDU requirements are at that time, those will be the new requirements. If it's just a rehab, then the original requirements will continue.
So we should have a little humility about the timeline that we're getting value for. We don't know, it could be 99 years if it's a really enduring building, or it could be 50 years. It's just hard to know exactly. Okay. All right. I don't see any lights. Are there lights? Okay, sorry. It's a solid light, so it means that it's on. So go ahead. It wasn't a requested light. It was just an on light. Sorry. Oh, I don't have the blinker. That's it.
These lights, sir.
Thank you. We're figuring out our lights up here, you know, and 40 to 50, 99 years. I'm not sure we're getting the best deal on the 25. So I just want to state that while I agree with, you know, and and we need to dig into that. Yeah, we both want to look into it. You know, I tend to defer to the chair. I mean, if it's not going to cause any harm, and there is a situation that could help, you know, great, because I think it's in line with the intent that we want these to be. If we're going to do the policy, we want them to be affordable as long as possible, as you know, under the MPDU program. So I, you know, I just wanted to say those two things. So I obviously defer to the bill's sponsor on that.
Well, thank you. Why don't we hold on this for now? And I'll give some thought to whether I want to proceed to, you know, introduce additional clarifications or changes. I think the scope of the bill was pretty wide as introduced, so it would allow us to do quite a few changes. Council President and I talked about that at the time. It actually was the intent to use this as a vehicle to review the policy and you know, consider changes, but we just didn't because time was precious. But there's no reason we couldn't also do that. Council President?
Thank you. So, I mean, just also for my colleagues, as we just adopted those regional targets with the Council of Government, so my goal is that we will hold a council session to discuss all of this and then pass a resolution, hopefully, where the county council, as well as we'll invite municipalities to see if they want to join, we will agree to work towards those targets. And then the PHED committee can begin to work on actually examining what we have in place right now, where the opportunities are, what could we perhaps, you know, address, changes that we might be able to make, et cetera, to get us to that target, right, and set forth some interim targets to get there. So I think that it would be important to take a look at all of this within that larger context, because it's not going to be an easy thing to do, but I do believe it's definitely doable. And there may just be some other interesting legislation that we may want to consider as we're working towards achieving this. So just wanted to kind of share that, because obviously it was important for COG to first make that determination, and then we will all have to figure out where do we fit in, what is that number, and how do we get there as different jurisdictions. So I do appreciate just, you know, perhaps taking a little bit more time to take a step back and then looking at the totality and sort of the holistic picture.
Yeah, I will, thank you. So we'll not take a vote, and I may seek some new approaches here in this bill, and others, of course, are always encouraged to do the same. Any additional final comments? No. All right, thank you. We're complete.